everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Enquiry. Today, Lisa, Jess, and I are going to dive into the art of defining and capitalizing on your greatest strength. As we know, strength is what defines us all, and the foundational aspect of strengths, whether they are within our personal realm or professional realm, allows us to actually achieve great success. So, Lisa, what are the definition for you of great strengths?
Yeah. So, before we delve deep into this, Sabine, I'm just going to create a quick little plug for our upcoming masterminds. We're so excited to be bringing these to many cities this year, and top of mind is our upcoming one in London, which is going to be Tuesday, March 19th. And we'll also have one in Hartford, which will be Tuesday, April 16th. So these events are designed to help you unlock your authentic identity and to be part of a group of people doing the same. So it's also that community of not doing it on your own and being with us. I just wanted to create that little quick reminder for everyone if you're tuning in. And then I guess, Sabine, I think often when we think of strengths, we immediately conjure up this almost like positive and negative, right? Like what am I strong in? What am I weak in? Which is fine. Self-reflection is amazing. We're going to talk about that today. And vulnerability too. But the thing that I often think of when I think of strength, and probably a lot of it was my training as a dancer, and in particular a ballerina, is that you really need a strong foundation. And so for me, it is strong foundation in which you leverage that strength to capitalize on your brand, on your identity, on all these things that you need. And if you do that without building that upon strength, it becomes very difficult to create what we've been talking about, which is congruency and foundation. So yeah, back to you to see what you think about that.
Yeah, so I'll just start by saying for me, strengths include a number of components. It will have to be looking, and you don't get them, as you come out of school, right? Some of them are embedded as from when we are very young, but then some actually built over time as we go through our career. So for me, those include a combination of talent, knowledge, skills we build over time as individual, and that we process and harness over time. And as individual, there are things we really enjoy doing, energizers, and things we like doing less, but we are competent. We can do them at the level we are in. We can do most of those things. It's just our personality said, you know what, I really like to do research. And sometimes our personality said, really, I don't like to be on the phone, right? So really understanding our talent, knowledge, and skills is going to be really critical. And that allows us to achieve goals and objectives and achieve the right outcome. What's your view, Jess?
So I love what you're saying when you bring in what energizes you and what drains you. I think that's such a great litmus test of whether or not you're living in authenticity. Because sometimes as professionals, we have to flex. Maybe there are certain tasks that are draining. They're not our favorite. They don't come naturally. But for the sake of getting things accomplished, moving the ball forward, you just have to sort of flex and do these things that are outside of your comfort zone. But that shouldn't apply to the way that you express your point of view, the way you see the world. If you're having to actually flex your personality, your core beliefs and values, then something's not aligned and it really, really needs some deep examination. So I think authentic identity is when you're speaking from a place that does feel energizing, at least what your passions are, what your point of view is, and what your approach is feels very natural. It feels innate, and it feels like it's building on those strengths that you have. And if you feel like you're constantly drained and constantly flexing and constantly just trying to maintain a mask or a veneer, you're definitely not operating from an authentic place, and you need to examine that. And Lisa, one of the things I love about the work that we're all doing together is we've partnered with Plum, and they have this really great assessment tool where we get to sort of find what energizes us and what drains us. And what's interesting is we all did our profiles, and I think we found we have a lot of similar strengths. This isn't surprising. But we found that we can be competent at all of the 10 sort of categories, we can accomplish them. But I thought it was spot on in terms of identifying the amount of energy it was either giving me or taking away from me when I have to do certain tasks. So I loved that insight. And the fact that even just taking that sort of survey, that internal audit, and looking at it and seeing reflected back exactly what I expected makes me feel confident that I am living authentically. I'm working authentically. That is what I expected to see and hear. But I'm curious, what do you think, Lisa? And I'd love to hear a little bit about your profile too.
Well, I mean, okay, so first of all, I totally agree with what we're saying. And with both the perspectives, to your point, Sabine, we learn, so we start kind of innately, right? And then we learn, we build muscle, and we build a lot of muscle. And we were quite conditioned to build that muscle, right? We were put through, I'll call it like extreme things, events over our lives in which we build that muscle. And then you get to a point where you're like, well, why is this incongruent? And you don't even use the words, I'm going to be really blunt, I don't even use the words like incongruent. I'm just like, yeah, I don't like this, or I'm avoiding this, or I don't want to do this. Or quite honestly, maybe I'm not my best composed self when I do X, Y, or Z. And you just know that, like, and you may use a word like triggered, or maybe I'm not my best self, or maybe I could have had a better moment at that, Jess. And then I think what was very insightful when, we looked at our results, and in me particular, I'll use one example because you know me, I'm happy to tell what I did. So communication is like my top energizer. Number one, storytelling, getting people on board. Where are we going? How are we going there? And then my biggest depleter, this will be funny, is simplifying that or architecting that in a very crisp, organized way, which anybody that knows me knows that I love to speak in analogies and little ambiguity and drawing parallels, but I like to tell that story. And so I thought, oh, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because anytime I'm asked to break that down, Jess, I just get really like, not only like depleted, but I try to avoid situations in which I'm asked to do that over and over and over again. And I didn't really understand why. So to me, it wasn't I'm not good at it. It was like, wow, I have naturally started avoiding over indexing on having to do that with the people I associate with, Jess, with the projects I work on. And I hadn't yet connected that to my authentic identity and my like personal brand. So I don't know if you and Sabine had a similar thought, but for me, drawing on my strength is communication in this example. But if I took it as just as at, I could potentially be in an environment that was very depleting if I don't understand some of the some of the sub elements of that, and then understanding that context. And Sabine and Jess, I know you both had similar, we have these overall awareness of our strengths, but how do we understand these little nuances that actually really do create a huge difference?
Yeah, I was just talking to one of our friend executives in the United States, in Hartford, actually, and we were talking about these energizers and depleters. She said, number one is innovation. I said, how did you guess that? You're always looking for trends and looking at, Horizon 3 and 2 stuff. I said, oh, wow, I guess this is alignment. So innovation being my first one, which is really looking at where the world is going in the future. And actually the way I do it, as you know, is not just looking at our industry. I look at the adjacency. I find that very interesting to look at what others are doing and what we can learn, because as we know, we are not always the fastest moving entities in insurance to get the ball rolling with regards to the change, which is going to drive competitive advantage. The second is decision making. And people who know me is, as long as I have 8 out of 10 takes, I will make a decision. So I make decision really quickly, as long as it feels very right in my guts. And as I said, it's checklist based, and I'm very good at saying no as well and walking away. The last one is communication as well. And as you know, Lisa, I love writing, I have my podcast, I have all those channels going, but that is a proof, right? Where we have a clear alignment around what drives us and how we implement it. And we are all implementing this in different ways. Where I guess I'm not the strongest, but I think most executives are, when you've mastered the art of doing things, managing a lot of people is not what we want to do. We just want to keep on driving and walking and pushing along and building and bringing new innovations to our industry. So that means we need people able to project manage, right? Other people to get the job done. What about you, Jess?
Well, I love what you're saying about how to turn these strengths into success. And I think one of the strategies we are innately doing by even collaborating and working with each other is choosing partners that maybe you're not identical in your strengths, and by choosing projects where you do get to lean into what it is that you're really great at. So I'm with you, Sabine. I'm not much of a people manager. I never have been. It's just not something that I innately understand or know how to do. And I've tried it, and I can just admit it's very, very draining. It's possible, but it's not enjoyable at all. So I tend to work in small partnerships, collaborations. I've intentionally avoided situations where I manage large teams of people. It's just because it's not a strength that I have. And so I think a strategy, once you identify your strengths, is this mitigation of the things where you're not strong, to start to pay attention and say, okay, I could put 80% of my energy, because it's going to take that much, into managing people, or I can find someone that can do that for me. I can choose projects where that's not required, so that I'm now putting most of my energy into the places where it's going to have more of an impact. Otherwise, I'm depleted. Now I only have 20% left to actually drive this thing forward because I'm so distracted by working outside of my strengths. So I think choosing partners really wisely, I think understanding who you're working with and what their goals are and what their strengths are is really important. I think it's a great strategy to lean into those strengths, is just to surround yourself with people that can close the gaps where necessary. So like I said, we're similar, but I still think we're complementary. We're not three identical humans that have the exact same skill sets. And so it enables us to work together really well.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Lisa, I think what we can see with our profiles, whilst they are complementary as well, is also learning from, how we grow as individuals, right? Where we were 2 years ago, where we were a year ago, where we are today is very different, right? And understanding how us as a team work is critical as well.
Let's click in on that a little bit, because I think that at least when I was, younger in my career, less experienced, I really had I'll totally disclose this. I really had this incongruence with clearly, let me start by saying I always love constructive criticism. Having grown up as a dancer, I'm actually, if anything, hypercritical, like perfectionist tendency critical, right? But let me step back and say I was incongruent with all of these, learning to be things that you weren't innately aligned with. Okay, so I'm gonna take this a little bit deeper. And what it was is now I've learned, all these amazing tools later, now I learned that what that incongruency was is I had this depleter, and someone was asking me to spend 90+% of my time, energy, and effort mastering something that depleted me. And by the way, back in those days, I didn't know the things like depleters. I didn't understand that. And so what I said, and you'll love this example, was a tennis example. And I said this to an executive coach, right, that had been hired for me and all this stuff. And I said, why are you trying to teach me how to volley when what I'm really good at is acing the serve? Shouldn't we be working on spin? Or, keep me out of the volley. The volley's going to, and I didn't even know these words like the P leaders. I will get worn down if and when I get drawn into the volley. So my game needs to be acing the serve. Clearly, you know how to volley. We're all saying we have the muscle to do all these things. And so what's fascinating to me, Jess and Sabine, is that I didn't realize that what I was actually begging that executive coach to understand is, what are my energizers? And by the way, that doesn't mean it's easy to do your energizers. It doesn't mean you don't work hard. And there's this famous phrase that's clearly Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Fight or flight. Anytime we get drawn into things that are intimidating or fearful or draining, we enter fight or flight mode. You cannot stay in fight or flight mode very long. When you're in a mode of engagement, right, that's connected to your energizers, no matter how hard it is, it's like running a marathon, you can stay engaged in that for a long time. So I connect that back to this foundation we need to build with our strengths, our energizers. We can work on really hard things and sustain elongation in the, hard work aspects if we're on that foundation of our energizers, because we can draw upon the natural energy, almost like self-charging. We can self-charge our batteries. And I would love to know what you all think about that, because I found that really interesting to connect and thread through that. Clearly, to your point, Sabine, we're a little more experienced now and we can look back with reflection.
Jess, that's for you first.
So when it comes to techniques or ways to sort of find that energy and to start to build that up, I think, again, it goes back to something we've discussed a lot, which is self-work, self-reflection, really understanding and knowing yourself, because by observation, you're going to see these patterns and where they are. And then I think it becomes about being organized. It takes a little bit of time and investment to get organized and to start to plan your day. But I think everyone should do these internal audits where you're looking at your calendar, you're looking at who are you meeting with, you're looking at the tasks that sit ahead of you if you're using productivity software, and start to actually journal and record. Where am I feeling energized? Where am I feeling drained? Find the patterns and then plan accordingly. I mean, we can all be data scientists to some degree with that because we know ourselves. So to actually do a little self-analysis and see where that is. And then that alone is just going to shift things dramatically, because you'll start to know this. It's always this meeting. It's always this person, or it's always this project. And not to be afraid to cut some things out, because if you're trying to bring in something really big that you want to do, and a lot of the people that we're working with through these authentic identity masterminds have a very specific objective. They want to write that book. They want to launch that company. They want to take this thing into a new marketplace, a new country. They're not going to do that if they're constantly being drained because they're sidelined by these other projects that are unrelated, that aren't pushing this forward. And so that internal audit, and then the fearlessness that comes with, okay, something's got to go here. So release that energy and redirect it where I want it to go. So I think that the decisiveness, Sabine would have no issue with that, by the way. She's very decisive, but working on that.
I'm very decisive, as you know, and I'm very direct. And that's the thing. It might be because I'm married to an American Dutch. I love working with the Dutch people. I told you, ladies, I love working with Nordic people as well. Very direct. You know where you stand. And so therefore, I've applied as well probably some of those techniques where I tend to be very direct. But I would like to go back to one point Lisa made around what we call the crocodile brain. There are things which are depleting us, but also things which actually, when they are depleting us, just go straight into what we call the crocodile brain, which is at the back of your brain. And it's scientifically proven, because when I work with startups on their pitch, we have to make the content super engaging and entertaining, at least for 5 minutes, so that we don't get into that crocodile brain. And the theory goes that it could be, as you said, Lisa, people you listen to, the voice, monotone voice, right? It makes you fall asleep. You can see people falling asleep sometimes at conferences. It's because there's no movement. And so really understanding how the brain works and how behavior impact the way we are attracted to people or not becomes also critical. But going back to this concept of strength, right? We talked about why it's important, about knowledge, it's about skills, it's about talent. The benefit from somebody working for a big company will be, I guess, increased confidence, job satisfaction, because we're working on things we love doing, and we actually end up seeing us grow in that company as well, because we are fulfilled by the goal and objective we've set for ourselves. But it's all done, what you both said, around self-assessment, auditing, identifying what are our personal strengths. And often it doesn't happen overnight. You don't just find those, in a short period of time. You have to, it's like yoga, right? It's like meditation. It's like think times where I talk about visualization. It's about finding that space to really own into those strengths so that we can make the best out of them. So next, when we think about the masterminds, Lisa, Jess, what do we want to bring into that environment which will allow our guest participant, our friends, our colleagues to, I guess, become, what do we want to do for them to become better winners at everything?
So I think one thing we could talk about as we're looking at the mastermind is who else has done it? Who are some notable people that have successfully done this, and just give some inspiration to our attendees to start to look at it that way. So we talk a lot here about people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. We've discussed them a few times. You know, I think Steve Jobs is a great example as an innovator, which Sabine can relate to. He very famously dropped out of university, you know, to go actually build and make things. And that's what innovators do. When they see an opportunity, they move into it. They don't sit and wait and check boxes and say, I need to finish all of these things first. That's not how innovation happens. It happens very quickly, and it happens when you see a gap and you start to fill that gap. And so that's what those problem solvers do. And he was very authentic and true to himself. And he did that his entire lifetime, his entire career, and obviously built one of the most amazing companies that everyone holds up as like the best brand, the best design, the best tech ever. Then you have Elon Musk, very different type of person, iconic, you know, just as well known, just as probably by a lot of metrics successful, but not necessarily an innovator. A lot of what Elon Musk has done has been through acquisition, you know, by seeing what other people were doing well and deciding to invest in it, pull money into it, amplify it. He's not necessarily a car designer, a rocket designer. He's not the guy that's building the things that he's putting out into the world, but he is someone with a really big vision who, if we believe what he says now with X, sees a way to connect all of those dots and bring those things together. So he's more of a big, broad strategist than an innovator, but he's still making his mark. And I think by leaning into that strength that he has, it's the way that he's become as successful as Steve Jobs did, by leaning into innovation. And then if you even look outside of technology and outside of these larger perspectives, to someone like Maya Angelou, you know, an amazing poet and author and playwright, and essentially an artist, a cultural icon as well, you know, and an activist. This is someone who has an innate ability to create, to write, to express herself verbally. She could have done a million things with that, you know, when you have that innate talent. But the way that she chose to do it authentically from her personal experience is what elevated her from merely being, you know, a really great writer, someone who people enjoyed their books, to an icon, to an absolute just like cultural, you know, matron, because she was speaking so authentically and putting things into the world that were so important and so personal to her. And that elevated her. So I like to look at all of those people, like they're successful by a lot of metrics, but I think it is the personal qualities that they bring to the table that is what really separates them from the rest. And that's how you recognize them and you relate to them, because you know that they're being true to themselves. Agree with them or don't, but that's not the point. The point is whether or not you believe them. And they're all very believable in their authenticity.
Yeah, there's so much in that. And I, you know, the underscore of that is they don't have to tell a consistent story, because it's rooted and foundationally in their authenticity. And so I think one thing that sometimes people struggle with, which of course we help with in the mastermind, is nobody's trying to be inauthentic. By the way, like we're all like, okay, I am who I am and I can only be me. I get it. One thing that we're trying to help with is some people, like Steve Jobs, I would assert, like Maya Angelou, like an Elon Musk, and lesser known names as well, are just innately good at either intentionally connecting who they are throughout all those, or unintentionally, it's just they're so dominant at that authenticity that it permeates through everything they associate with, etc. Right? I think if we think about, you know, the workshop and the masterminds and how we're really trying to help people, right? It's that sometimes the patterns that are really the authenticity are buried deep underneath. And you may not be able to see those, which to your point, Sabine and Jess, requires a lot of reflection. It requires a lot of taking pause out of the who I am, what my day job is, what I'm accomplishing, what my tasks are. Like we all understand that. And most of you as executives probably take that time to do your personal development plan or your, next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year outlook at work, all those things. But do you take time to abstract all the things you're giving yourself to with your strengths and the underlying pattern? Can you articulate the underlying pattern that runs congruent through all these things? I know it sounds simple. Identifying that pattern is huge because it's not written anywhere. That's not on your LinkedIn profile. That's not in your job description. It's probably not in your pitch deck if you're a founder, right? That underlying pattern is what we call your foundational strength. That is your authenticity. Once you identify that, it's so effortless to connect that and stay true to that. And I would love to know what you think, Sabine, in terms of, how we make this actionable for participants, because I think that's a huge part of the workshop. And that's a huge value that even I think, wow, I learned so much from connecting the patterns.
Yeah, great words, connecting the patterns. And, we are often unable to do that until we reach, a maturity stage where we have experience and knowledge, right? Time and depth. So then we can actually analyze and actually find conclusions, patterns, facts, which actually confirm what we are talking about. Because we can actually find those facts by talking to friends and colleagues like you both, right? You see me every day and you actually see my strengths and my weaknesses. So that is looking at externally feedback. But we can actually use amazing tools and techniques to do that as well. One of them is for sure Plum.io, the profile we've decided to use for our programming, because that allows us to really understand our energizers and our depleters. We know how to do all those 10 capabilities or 10 strengths. Let's call them strengths or capabilities. And we know that some are really good for us. They are giving us so much energy, and some are really depleting us, really draining us. We do them and we know they are taking a lot of effort. So that first is about the tooling and really looking at the data. And actually, I have a question for you both, Jess and Lisa, because there's a nice page, right, on the profile where it says you are, right? You are authoritative, you are perceptive, you are all those great qualities. So maybe you want to share some of yours because they're interesting. And then that allows you to start shaping that big, value statement, right? I think it's also about getting those feedback. By getting into a group, you can actually talk to others and get immediate feedback and learn from others' praise and reinforcement. Let's call them praise and reinforcement so that we can improve ourselves. And I remember when we ran this first workshop in Israel, we had some of our participants doing some of these activities until 2-3 o'clock in the morning, which was a sign that we hit an area of either discomfort, but of realignment as well. And then journaling, writing. So I'm going to show you, I have my book, right? I write on my book every day. I do write. And, I know we are on computers all the time now, but actually transferring knowledge from your brain to writing actually forces you to learn and use a different part of the brain. I'll stop here and ask you ladies, what were you are in Plum?
This stimulated such a great thought, Sabine, because I realized this happened when we did this workshop in Israel naturally. And so one of the things my Plum profile says about me, and I'd have to go back and look to find the exact wording, but essentially it says, I'm empathetic, I'm a good listener and relate to where the other person's coming from. And what's interesting about that to me is when I was younger, I've always had these qualities, right? We are who we are. That's what we're all talking about, being authentic. But when I was younger, it was described as being overly sensitive. which is not a strength if you think about it, the way that's said. And so, but actually empathy is a strength. Being quiet and listening is a strength. And so I think what's so great about this process that we'll go through is it's a few layers. First of all, the Plum profile really helps articulate and illuminate all of these things. But then the fact that we're doing this with everyone that participates in this, by the way, from the facilitators to the attendees and participants, very top level, very experienced, very successful people, really like best in class at whatever it is that they do, which means when we are doing these workshop moments in the group, you're getting some of the best brains on earth, like examining what you're working on and helping you to kind of formulate and articulate it, because it's a very engaging process. And so what I think people are going to find is that they might have a preconceived notion of even more. I don't really think we're weak in any ways. We just have the things that come easy to us, and we have the things where we need to pay more attention. And the awareness in and of itself is the attention that you need. But when you have these brains and we're all working together to facilitate and articulate things, it's like Susan Cain is a great example. She wrote the book Quiet. And it's a book about the power of being an introvert, because a lot of introverted people have absolutely exhausted themselves trying to fake extrovertism. You know, they're trying to do public speaking or trying to do things and bring all this energy to the table when they don't really need to. There's actually power in being quiet. There's power in being introspective and reflective. So I love this workshop. Become Easy are your strengths, and you might not consider them that way, but we'll show you how you capitalize that, how you build on that. And that part of the exercise is so powerful, because then you go, oh, you know what? I'm not overly sensitive. I'm actually a very good listener. And because I listen so well, I understand the person across from me. And when it's my turn to speak, I'm saying the right thing. I'm closing the deal. I'm converting them. I'm doing what I need to do because I leaned into my strength. Lisa, what does your profile say about you?
So I pulled it up while you were talking, because I mean, it's, so I want to connect this just before I say what it says about me into kind of how we leverage this. So as part of the audit, the self-reflection, as part of understanding and connecting what we're working on, that foundation, building that core that's kind of continually re-energizing yourself. And then I'm now personally working on, which would be like during the workshop and post-workshop, how do I apply this to my narrative, my tone, my brand architecture, so that people see congruency? But mine is, and I just love this, by the way, shout out to the Plum team. I love this, because you can leverage these adjectives to train your ChatGPT bot and all these things. But it says you are influential, dominant, persuasive, authoritative, self-confident, and creative. I read it and I'm like, yeah, right? Like, yeah. But the thing that I really love about this, and then I want to read one other thing. It says professionally you are. And by the way, there's a lot of them. There's you can just keep swiping in your Plum profile. I'm just giving you a snap. Professionally you are a good fit for organizations and roles that appreciate a high level of directness. Sabine, you and I have that in common. And getting to a solution quickly. When I read that, I thought about all the times that I felt incongruent in a role. And it was when an organization didn't appreciate that. And I felt like I couldn't be myself. The reason why I want to kind of come into this is when we think of tone and we think of authenticity, right? Like I am always, from a tone perspective and, responding maybe on LinkedIn or, in a webinar or on stage, my directness is almost expected because it's so innately, foundationally who I am. It's authentic. It wouldn't be authentic to me. And I'm not saying that we don't balance time and respectful and how we collaborate with each other, but it wouldn't be authentic to me to be Jess. It just wouldn't be who I am. And so I think that that's amazing that we understand that about ourselves and that we stop, to your point, Jess, a lot of maybe direct people or introverts, etc. Extroverts. We've tried to become introverts, right? Like, so we've all been conditioned, and I don't say you build muscle to be always respectful depending on your environment, but it's interesting that we've all tried to become the other when our authenticity will always shine out. So Sabine, I'd love to know what yours were. We haven't gotten yours. You are.
Oh, I didn't pull mine, but definitely authoritative conversational were there. Direct, definitely. Maybe something I can share with the delegates and attendees of our session. But as you were speaking as well, Lisa, I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out, if I may. So Chief is going to close in London to focus on their core market in the United Kingdom, in the United States. So they are closing in the United Kingdom. However, during the past year and meeting some amazing people as part of my core group, I also had a guide, Olwen. And she said to me, she read my posts, she read my LinkedIn. She said, Sabine, you are incredibly consistent on your LinkedIn. And I had to say to her, I have to be consistent and I have to be super neutral because I work with big brands. So I will never shout out, meaning be obnoxious. I will, even if I think about it, I will always be very polite. I will delete people who are unpolite on my post. I will block them as well. And the reason is I am authoritative, conversational, professional, and neutral when I appear on social media platform because I use them for business only. I don't do personal in social media. I only do business. And so it was interesting to have that conversation with her because I never also look at that lens when she said, oh, I read a lot of your posts and you're very consistent. And I had to actually explain why. And, I can feel it in my guts. I cannot be obnoxious. I feel highly uncomfortable to write something which is not polite. It literally goes into my guts. So that's why being authentic means so many different things. And maybe we should actually do a session on the Enquiry on authenticity and generative AI as well, because I woke up 2 days ago and I said, I need
That
to
would
write
be
this
a great
article, which I'm
one.
going to write probably over the weekend. But literally, I woke up 5 o'clock in the morning 2 days ago. I need to write this authenticity and generative AI because you can be authentic, right? In the world of technology, because we are working with a lot of technologies. But what would that mean to be authentic when we actually use technology as well? So, ladies, what would be the main conclusion, right? We want people to come to our mastermind. We have one in London on the 19th of March. We have one in Hartford on the 19th of April. We have one in Paris on 7th of May. We have one in New York on the 4th of June. So what's your view, ladies?
Well, I think one of my takeaways from this is, and I live in Paris, by the way, so I'm a big, big, big foodie. I really appreciate good food and good wine. And one thing I don't like is anything bland, anything homogenized, anything just boring or lukewarm. And so what I love about the work we're doing is when you come out of it as a participant, you are going to have your flavor, your unique, just taste. And that's what's going to attract people to you. And that's what's going to work for you. And I love that all of this work, whether you're quiet, whether you're extroverted, whether you're polite, whether you're enthusiastic, some people are blunt, it's all fine. No one's superior or inferior here, but we're different. And we're really embracing those differences and intentionally leaning into them so we stand out in a crowd.
I love that. Well, two things from my perspective as we wrap this up. First is my profile hates becoming part of a sausage grinder machine. Like I hear the word frameworks and process. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to that. There's no way that can be individualized. So let me just tell you, we have found a way to have a foundation of tried and true techniques, frameworks, processes, tools like plum.io, amazing frameworks built by Sabine, Jess, and myself. You will not feel like you're on a conveyor belt of a framework, which I think to me is the most energizing. But for those of you who like process, procedure, and expectation, it also gives you that. So I just wanted to say that, it gives you like what you're seeking. It's not just one of us. And then the second thing I would just like to add is, listen, we're not doing this for us. This is that the three of us came together very organically and we were talking about our experiences. And we thought, how do we, even if we help one person, get a leg up on what we all had to cobble together and chisel, and how do we figure this out? I was talking to another woman yesterday. She's like, oh, it was like climbing a wall with, your bare hands. If we can give one of you a lift up and we help you with your personal authentic identity, your brand, all the things you want to accomplish, and it becomes self-charging for you, that's actually what we're after. So we would love to have people attend because we want to share this gift with others. So for me, that's why we're energized about seeing you all in our cities this year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love meeting people. I love connecting with, women, men, connection in our network. And, we all want to drive and add value in people's life. Today, we live in a world where personal identity and authenticity is the new words on the street, right? Is how you actually drive a sustainable future. Jess mentioned Elon Musk. We have talked about so many different names, and even on our post, Joe Malone, Brené Browns. And so look at all those amazing personalities. They had to discover themselves to set the path to where they are today. Imagine if we were all able to do that, what a world we would be in, right? So on this note, make sure to check our LinkedIn post, make sure to join one of our mastermind in one of the cities which is the closest to you. And we look forward to make a difference in your life. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.